In nervous system part 1, we have discussed about nervous system, divisions of nervous system and cells of nervous system and their function. So central nervous system is divided into two main parts, brain and spinal cord. In this central nervous system part 2 video, we will discuss about brain. The brain is the largest and most complex portion of the nervous system. It controls perception, movement, sensation, thinking, and many other physiological aspects. The sections of the brain include two cerebral hemispheres, the Diencephalon, the Brainstem, and the Cerebellum. There are approximately 100 billion multipolar neurons in the brain as well as axonal branches that allow these neurons to communicate throughout the nervous system. The brain and the spinal cord are connected via the brainstem, which allows communication to flow in both directions. The spinal cord also provides a two-way communication between the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The organs of the CNS are surrounded by bones, fluid, and membranes. The largest part, cerebrum, coordinates sensory and motor functions and higher mental functions such as memory and reasoning. The Diencephalon processes additional sensory information. The nerve pathways of the brainstem connect nervous system components and regulate certain visceral activities. The cerebellum coordinates voluntary muscular movements. The brain is designed as a central cavity surrounded first by gray matter and then by white matter. The surface of the cerebral hemispheres are highly folded and covered by a superficial layer of gray matter called the cerebral cortex. The gray matter consists mostly of neuron cell bodies and interneurons, whereas the white matter consists of myelinated fiber tracts. The white matter contains bundles of axons that connect one part of the brain to another. This pattern is different in the spinal cord, in which the gray matter is located in the center and the white matter is outside. The brain has three main parts: forebrain, which consists of cerebrum and diencephalon; midbrain consists of tectum, cerebral aqueduct, and cerebral peduncles; Hindbrain, which consists of cerebellum, pons, and medulla oblongata. The subdivisions of a brain is cerebrum, diencephalon, brainstem, and cerebellum. First, we will see cerebrum. The cerebrum is divided into two halves, the right and left hemispheres. Longitudinal fissure divides the cerebrum into right and left cerebral hemispheres. The bulk of the cerebrum is white matter, which consists of bundles of myelinated nerve fibers called tracts. Tracts carry impulses from one part of the cerebrum to the other, or from the cerebrum to the other parts of the brain or spinal cord. Most of the tracts that pass from one hemisphere to the other travel through a large bridge called the corpus callosum. This arrangement allows the brain's two hemispheres to communicate with each other. The surface of the cerebrum, called the cerebral cortex, consists of a thin layer of gray matter. Even though the layer is thin, 40% of the brain mass is gray matter. Masses of gray matter is called basal nuclei, or sometimes called basal ganglia, lie deep within the cerebrum. These structures play a role in the control of movement. Other tracts which carry information back and forth between the brain and spinal cord. These tracts are extensions of the ascending or sensory spinothalamic tracts and the descending motor corticospinal tracts. Others carry impulses from the cortex to nerve centers of the brain and spinal cord. Beneath the cerebral cortex is white matter, comprising most of the cerebrum. It contains myelinated axon bundles, some of which pass from one cerebral hemisphere to the other. The tracts cross in the brainstem, with the right side of the brain sending impulses to the left side of the left side of the body sending impulses to the right side of the body. Now we will see the lobes of the cerebral cortex. Frontal lobe forms the anterior portion of each cerebral hemisphere. Parietal lobe lies posteriorly to the frontal lobe. Temporal lobe lies below the frontal and parietal lobes. Occipital lobe forms the posterior part of each cerebral hemisphere. Insula lies under the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes, deep within the lateral sulcus, forming a portion of the brain floor. Now let us see the functions of each lobe. Each lobe have different functions. Frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is having the functions of thinking, language, that is Broca's area. The area we will be discussing in a moment. Problem solving, voluntary movements, spontaneity, memory, initiation, judgment, impulse control, social behavior, and sexual behavior. Temporal lobe is having the functions of auditory sensation, hearing, attention, reading, language comprehension, that is Wernicke's area, memory, long-term memory, sexual behavior. Parietal lobe has two functional regions: to receive sensory nerve impulses and translate them into sensation and perception, to integrate the sensory, visual, and other information from a variety of sources and create what we perceive. Occipital lobe at the back of the brain contains a center responsible for visual perception, sight. Next, we will see the localization of functions. The different areas of the cerebrum are associated with specific functions. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for executive functions. Example, planning for the future, problem solving, and organizing multiple tasks. The motor cortex is involved in the movement of skeletal muscles. The sensory cortex receives and processes all the information received from the sense organs and from sensory cells, those that produce sensation of pressure, pain, and warmth. Visual cortex processes information received from the retina of the eye. The angular gyrus is involved in processes related to language, number processing, and spatial cognition and memory retrieval. Wernicke's area is located in the left side of the brain and is responsible for the comprehension of speech. Broca's area is a region in the front lobe of the dominant hemisphere, usually the left, involved in putting thoughts into words and speech production. The auditory cortex processes auditory information, that is sound. The insula or insular cortex is a distinct but hidden part of the cerebral cortex, folded deep within the lateral sulcus. It is believed to have diverse functions linked to consciousness, memory, learning, taste, autonomic control, equilibrium, visceral sensation, and emotional response. The limbic system, sometimes called the emotional brain. The limbic system is the seat of emotion and learning. Emotions such as hunger, thirst, fear, sex drive, and other motivations. It is formed by a complex set of structures that encircle the corpus callosum and thalamus. In brief, it links areas of the lower brainstem which control autonomic function with areas in the cerebral cortex associated with higher mental functions. Two key structures of the limbic system include the hippocampus and amygdala. Feelings of anger, fear, sexual feelings, sorrow, and pressure result only because of a functioning limbic system. Next is diencephalon. The diencephalon provides a functional link between the cerebral hemispheres and the rest of the CNS. It contains three paired structures: the thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. Thalamus acts as a relay station for sensory impulses going to cerebral cortex for integration and motor impulses entering and leaving the cerebral hemispheres. It also has a role in memory. The epithalamus structure is linked to the pineal gland, which secretes the hormone melatonin responsible for sleep-wake cycles. Hypothalamus is closely associated with the pituitary gland and produces two hormones, antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. It is also the chief autonomic integration center and is a part of the limbic system, which is the emotional brain. The hypothalamus has many functions, and these include control of body temperature, autonomic nervous system, control of fluid balance and taste, control of appetite, associated with the limbic system, dealing with emotional reactions, control of sexual behaviors. These are the main functions of hypothalamus. Next, we will see about brainstem. The most superior region of the brainstem is the midbrain, with descending regions including the pons and medulla oblongata. The entire brainstem only makes up about 2.5% of the total brain mass. The midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata are each about 1 inch in length. The brainstem is organized similarly to the spinal cord, with deep grey matter surrounded by white matter fiber tracts. The brainstem also has nuclei of grey matter that are embedded in its white matter. This differs from the organization of the spinal cord. Behaviors needed for survival are produced in the brainstem. The brainstem creates a pathway for fiber tracts that connect higher and lower neural centers. The brainstem nuclei are also linked to the 10 pairs of the cranial nerves and are greatly involved with the innervation of the head. Between the Diencephalon and pons is the portion of the brainstem known as midbrain. The cerebral peduncles are the two stalks that are located on either side of the midbrain and are frontmost part of the midbrain and act as the connectors between the rest of the midbrain and the thalamic nuclei and thus the cerebrum. As a whole, the cerebral peduncles assist in refining motor movements, learning new motor skills, and converting proprioceptive information into balance and posture maintenance. It contains the largest ascending, sensory, and descending motor nerve tracts that run to and from the cerebrum and from the pons. Each peduncle has a crus cerebri, a leg-like structure containing a large corticospinal pyramidal motor tract that descends toward the spinal cord. Other fiber tracts, the superior cerebral peduncles, connect the midbrain to the cerebellum in its dorsal region. The roof of the midbrain is called the tectum. The cerebral aqueduct is the channel connecting the third and fourth ventricles. In the midbrain, nuclei are also located throughout the surrounding white matter. The largest midbrain nuclei are the corpora quadrigemina, which create 4 rounded protrusions on the dorsal midbrain's surface called colliculae on its posterior surface. The superior colliculae are 2 visual reflex centers coordinating head and eye movement. The inferior collicular relay impulses from the auditory center. The 2 superior colliculae are important for visual reflexes, as in tracking the movement of an object or focusing on something seen off to the side. 2 inferior colliculae are important for auditory reflexes, such as turning your head toward a sound or jumping at the sound of loud noise. Both colliculae direct the sensory messages onto the thalamus. 2 pigmented nuclei are located on each side of the white matter of the midbrain, the substantia nigra and the red nucleus. The substantia nigra has a high amount of melanin pigment and appears dark in color. When dopamine releasing neurons of the substantia nigra degenerate, Parkinson's disease results. The red nucleus has a rich blood supply and iron pigment. It is a part of reticular formation. Pons. Pons is lying between the midbrain and medulla oblongata. The pons is a bulge in the brainstem separated dorsally from the cerebellum by the fourth ventricle. It primarily contains conduction tracts that run either longitudinally, transversely, or dorsally. 3 nerve pairs, the trigeminal, 5th one, abducens, 6th one, and facial, 7th nerves, originate from the pontine nuclei. The pons also contain ascending, descending, and transverse tracts, longitudinal tracts, interconnected with other CNS stretches. The middle cerebellar peduncles are connected to the transverse fibers that cross the anterior surface of the pons. Next is medulla oblongata. The most inferior part of the brainstem is known as the medulla oblongata. It joins the spinal cord smoothly at the level of skull's foramen magnum. The cranial nerves known as the vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, and hypoglossal nerves originate from the medulla. It plays a vital role as a center of autonomic reflexes required for homeostasis. Important functional groups of visceral motor nuclei are controlled by the medulla oblongata. Its cardiovascular center includes both the cardiac center and vasomotor center. Its respiratory centers controls respiratory rhythm, rate, and depth. Various other centers of the medulla influence hiccuping, vomiting, coughing, swallowing, and sneezing. Motor nucleus and motor commands to peripheral effectors. The cerebellum is the last subdivision of the brain that you need to cover. The cerebellum is situated below and at the back of the cerebrum, and like the cerebrum, it is divided into two hemispheres which are linked together. As you seen in figure, the cerebellum has tracts of white matter called the arbor vitae, which branch like a tree. The surface of the cerebellum is highly convoluted. It has fine gyri known as folia, which have a folded appearance and transverse oriented. The cerebellum is bilaterally symmetrical with a worm-like vermis connecting its two hemispheres. Each cerebellar hemisphere is divided into anterior, posterior, and flocculonodular lobes. The cerebellum has its own thin outer cortex of gray matter, internalized white matter, arbor vitae. These paired masses include the dentate nuclei, and neurons of the cerebellum contain large Purkinje cells, uniquely distributing axons through the white matter to synapse with the central cerebral nuclei. Superior, middle, and inferior cerebellar peduncles connect the cerebellum with other brain structures. The function of the cerebellum is to coordinate smooth movement of the skeletal muscles, which include maintaining muscle tone that enables an upright posture and the ability to stand and walk, smoothness and accuracy of actions. For example, walking, talking, writing, feeding, and the ability to learn patterns of coordinated movements, learning to walk. The cerebellum receives sensory messages concerning the positions of limbs, muscles, and joints. It uses this information to fine-tune efferent skeletal muscle messages to coordinate position, balance, and movement. The effect is smooth, coordinated movement, such as touching the end of your nose with your finger while your eyes are closed. People who are proficient at keyboarding, either typing or playing piano, have a reflexive memory. When they were first learned to keyboard, it may have been necessary for them to watch their fingers move to each key. But by now, their cerebellum has fine-tuned messages so that keyboarding seems effortless. Here we conclude the divisions of brain.